Mathematics works.
With the help of Archimedes, we shall fly into the eye of the storm. Cross into Sicilian airspace, 1939.
Archimedes didn't know about continental drift. It's the siege of Syracuse.
214 BC.
That dial, it doesn't take us anywhere but here.
He built it to get help.
What?
No, all right. I know that sounds bad.
Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny takes Indy through famous periods of time in form of one final adventure, which includes fighting Germans in the 40s, meeting yet another previously unmentioned family member in the 60s, and altering the course of history in 213 BC.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
All of which is possible in just one movie because here's a live look at the writer's room. Yeah, so much like its predecessor, Dial of Destiny, for me at least, is a very curious case. On one hand, I don't really like it, and I can say that it's not that great of a movie, for reasons including the fact that a lot of it just doesn't even make sense. Villains who should be dead or at least paraplegic are doing more than fine. Narrative bridges between central plot points that should be organic are so clunky and forced, it's like the filmmakers are reaching through the screen to hammer them into your head.
In 213 BC, Roman forces laid siege.
Characters that have no clearly established aspirations have those aspirations anyway because that's what the story requires. Again, judging by how stuff here functions, it's as if this actually was the writer's room.
Guys, we have a problem. The movie's logic is decreasing every minute.
But that said, despite all the reasons I have to not enjoy Dial of Destiny, I still kinda do, at least certain parts of it. Not only because it's Indiana Jones, Raiders, the definitive adventure franchise, but also because it's a movie that does things that we don't really get to see anymore. It's a massive Hollywood blockbuster done in the old school way. See, even though blockbusters today are bigger than ever, most of them are kinda doing it by cheating. Being a big movie today usually means having a CGI background of a different planet, a computer-created fight of two CG characters going at it. You know, it's not the filmmakers doing the work. The massivity doesn't come from the writing, but more so from the effort of the overworked and underpaid CG artists. Whereas back in the day, that wasn't an option. Not every movie could rely on big CGI effects to be big. Filmmakers had to find other, more inventive ways to pull it off. And although Dial of Destiny is very much an insanely expensive modern blockbuster, it also uses a few really nifty size-related writing tricks dating back to a time when Hollywood in general had to be way more inventive. Writing tricks that all of us can use to make our movie feel bigger than most other modern 200 million blockbusters, even if we have less than quarter of that money.
Put your money away, son.
So, although Dial of Destiny does deserve an anatomy of a failure, and since everybody else is already crapping on it, today I want to focus on the topic of how it successfully makes more out of less and how we can do the same. The first way Dial of Destiny makes itself feel bigger than it is by setting its sequences and sections on the borders of ongoing events that seem like their own movies. For example, look at the World War II prologue sequence, where Indy has infiltrated German lines to retrieve a historical item to, of course, put it in a museum.
That belongs in a museum.
The sequence on its own... Oh, sorry for the noise, guys. I'm recording this on a plane and there's some turbulence because there's a bit of a storm outside or something. But yeah, the sequence on its own is already very grand and full of expensive CGI, but the reason it feels much grander than it alone ever could is because it doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's also something larger playing out around it. Yeah, Turns out that Indy's retrieval mission takes place at a time when the Allies are launching a full-scale aerial assault on German positions as they advance into Berlin. That's a gigantic event we get tiny glimpses of as we go along. We have to deal not only with German troops, but also with Allied bombs targeting those troops. We have to race not only against the clock, but also against the Germans' clock as they scramble to leave before the Allies arrive. We have to watch out not only for German gunfire, but also Allied gunfire.
Get down!
Again, while this is a huge sequence on its own, it's the fact that it plays against a glimpse of something way more huge around it that makes it feel more so.
Damn, boy! That's a thick-ass ball!
But maybe as a better example, look at the New York section following Indy's quote-unquote modern-day life. At face value, it's all pretty basic stuff. From Indy dealing with noisy neighbors, to riding the subway, to holding boring exposition lectures, to facing usual hurdles of fighting and running from bad guys looking for artifacts. However, what you may notice once again is that none of this happens in a vacuum, but rather as a tiny part of something grander.
Turn on the news. It's Moon Day, Mr. Jones.
Moon Day?
Right, the sequence takes place amidst a citywide parade being held for the astronauts who conquered the moon, which on some level affects everything within the sequence. It affects the clothes people wear, the behavior people show. I mean, the entire tussle with the bad guys is built on it. Indy uses the chaos of the masses to free himself and then uses a patrolman's horse to race through the parade. Everything that happens on the back of the Moon Day. And the reason, oh my god, it looks like the storm's getting worse. The plane's trembling like crazy. And the seatbelt light just came up. How great. Anyway, the reason this method of setting sequences on the outskirts of large events is so genius is essentially threefold. Firstly, the feeling of being a tiny part of something special is just inherently exciting. I'm sure we've all, for example, had a boring day in school that felt much less boring because for some school unrelated reason, that day was special. Whether it's Moon Day or Friday or whatever else, the feeling of the day not being ordinary makes the ordinary part of it feel much less mundanely ordinary. Secondly, you get more bang for your buck. You don't have to show the entire citywide parade to convey that it's there. All you need is glimpses to make the audience's imagination fill in the rest. Morocco doesn't feel alive because the entirety of Morocco is shown to be alive. It feels alive because things are happening beyond just our story. An annual black market event with all the big players is being held.
Big Rahim owns the Hotel Atlantique in Tangier.
A broken relationship from the past is being argued over.
What exactly do you hold, Scott?
Just some bail money and a lifetime of happiness.
I presume you sold the ring?
It didn't go for as much as I thought it would.
Our journey is but a droplet in a bigger world, which is why the world of our journey feels big. And thirdly, you get easily recognizable thumbnails to distinguish your sections and sequences with, in a way that creates a sense of progression. Oh, this is the Allied assault on German sequence, and now we're past it. Oh, this is the Moon Day sequence, and now we're past it. Oh, this is the broken heart seeking closure section, and now we're past it. Oh, this is just a sequence in a vacuum, and it seems to go on forever. I'm actually kinda bored right now. Once again, Dial of Destiny isn't necessarily the best example of this because a lot of its off-screen events cost a fortune to show anyway. But my point is that if you can't afford to make your background big on camera or with CGI, you can do so narratively. Your sequences will always feel grander if you convey the notion that they exist on the side of something grand. Uh-oh, the plane just broke in half, guys. We are now diving toward the ground at great velocity. I think this is the end for me. Yeah, goodbye, fellas and fellerettes.
The second way this movie makes itself feel bigger than it is by using negative reversals within scenes to elevate the scene's obstacles beyond their initial form. If you look at the prologue again, you'll notice that it's basically an endless list of out of the frying pan and into the fire. Indy has to survive interrogation by Germans, but then, boom, he also has to survive an Ally bomb. Indy has to catch up to the German train by car, but then, boom, he also has to worry about the officers riding in the back and their convoy. The obstacles begin one way and then suddenly shift into another form that requires extra effort to be overcome. And to be clear, while I've always said that negative reversals should make things tougher, that's not the full story. You could in fact argue that it's not always the case here, that the Ally bomb, for instance, actually saves Indy from certain doom. True. The full story of negative reversals is about ensuring that the solution required by the problem is different from that which is anticipated by the audience. For example, when Indy is being hanged by the Germans, every viewer has a clear idea of how it'll play out. Oh, Indy will somehow get free and take the Germans out. And now, if it's indeed what happens, it's a mediocre scene at best, because the audience is getting only what they expect. But of course, that's not what happens. The obstacle shifts from the Germans to the bomb, which now also shifts the solution required. The scene feels worth more than it initially was, because the problem in need of solving in it is different from what it initially was. And you can see this happening again and again throughout the movie. When Indy is riding away from the bad guys in the parade, we think the solution for the scene is for him to lose the bad guys. But then turns out, no, there's also an incoming train on top of that. The solution requires more than initially thought. When Indy is chasing the villain for the artifact in Morocco, we think the solution for the scene is for him to catch up to the villain. But then turns out, no. There's also the mobster with the broken heart coming after them. The solution requires more than initially thought. Size is relative, and the key to being big is to be bigger than what's beside you. And the reason this is important for every writer to understand is because scenes are defined by their obstacles and solutions. Indy diving down to look for treasure is not a scene, it's visual information. What is a scene is Indy running into lethal eels in the way and then having to fight his way past them before his brain runs out of oxygen, while Helena has to decide whether to go back to help him or not. Indy walking into a cave to look for treasure is not a scene, it's visual information. What is a scene is that there's something in the cave in need of overcoming.
Don't breathe.
Don't breathe?
A scene begins with a problem or intention and ends when that problem or intention has either been completed or failed. And the way to use that to your advantage is to continuously shift what exactly those two sides are. If the obstacle is that the bad guys show up to steal the hero's work, and the solution is that the heroes have this very obviously set up way to easily escape, everyone can see it coming, and it feels mediocre, tiny. It's a big reason why this treasure hunting section is hands down the worst in the movie. You just don't need to watch any of it to know exactly how it all goes. The biggest scenes that will stand out and stand the test of time are the ones that shift unexpectedly. So, to make your scenes feel big, make them bigger than they initially felt. Make them different, harder, unexpected. Make sure that the ultimate solution is not the same as what was suggested by the initial problem. Size is relative. The third way Dial of Destiny makes itself feel bigger than it is by standing on fresh ground not yet trampled down by other blockbusters. On the surface, the prologue, for example, seems very familiar. The German war machine is fighting a losing fight against the Allies. We've all seen that 1,000 times.
I've seen this one, this is a classic.
But what we haven't seen 1,000 times is that being shown from the German perspective. How it's the Germans who are scrambling to run. How it's the Allies who are the invisible dominant force wreaking havoc with ease. Usually, it's the Germans with the upper hand, even when they're losing. That's why this sequence feels significant, because it's just so unusual. Or, if you look at the Moon Day sequence, you'll find similar freshness and power dynamics. Essentially, the CIA is helping the German villain get the MacGuffin to keep him happy because he's important, leading to some shady stuff. And while the CIA being shady is nothing new,
I've seen this one. This is a classic.
what is new is that they're playing second fiddle, watching helplessly from the bleachers as the villain's men conduct operations and kill US civilians and cause mayhem on US soil. It's so unusual that it's almost weird.
Jesus, what the hell?
At least for me, it took a while to get adjusted because I'm so used to seeing the CIA being the one pulling the strings. It was too big to just swallow without first chewing. Or if you look at the Morocco sequence, again, it's a lot of familiar stuff. Chasing the villain through Tangier streets, that was already done by Bourne. But instead of being reduced to being Bourne's little brother, this movie does its own thing. The heroes do their chasing with the crappy tuk-tuk, and they also have to deal with the chase being a three-way, and at some point, a four-way. You've seen many chases, and even Tangier in other movies before, but not one with all these variables. It's fresh, exciting, and big. As a whole, I guess the best showcase of what I'm getting at is the ending, where, you know, somehow we conveniently travel in time to the siege of Syracuse to meet the creator of the MacGuffin, who somehow created the MacGuffin to somehow bring us there, and somehow.
That dial, it doesn't take us anywhere but here.
You built it to get help.
Well, we just scared off the entire Roman navy, so I think we got enough.
To be clear, I don't personally really like the ending, because it just doesn't make any sense. It needed way more writing work to make it work. But what I do like is the mentality it represents. The mentality of paving the way. The juxtaposition of a German warplane against the backdrop of a Roman fleet assault is something we've never seen. The image of a modern agent firing an LMG to mow down Roman foot soldiers is something we've never experienced. The obstacle of flying a plane over Roman warships is something we've never had to overcome. This finale as a whole is something really magical and new. Which is why it stands tall and also allows other movies to follow behind. See, because big Hollywood blockbusters have great financial power, they also have great responsibility to unlock new paths. For example, I still remember a script from some writer where a modern special forces unit gets stuck in the time of the Roman Empire to fight Caesar's legion. That's a cool idea that deserves to be a movie, yet it was never made because there was no comparison. No studio executive today will give multi-millions to a nameless project, whose success cannot be projected and proven with the prior project.
It's the dumbest f***ing bet I ever heard of.
Whereas Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones. It can do whatever it wants.
That's bloody nice. That is bloody lovely.
And had it only succeeded in doing this, it would have opened the gates for similar projects to follow and do their own thing. A bit like Marvel did, you know, a decade ago. Of course, Dial of Destiny didn't exactly succeed, but it has my respect for trying. It's a rare remnant of the old-school Hollywood era, where each blockbuster was viewed as a chance to explore a fresh path. An era where we could go from T1 to T2, no matter how crazy it seemed.
They had already made several lists of best villains of all time, and we were going to wreck that.
And the person who objected to it the most was Arnold.
My first thought was, bullshit. Is that gonna work?
And he said, Jim, I don't know about this. He said, I turn into Bambi here, but I'm the Terminator. Don't worry, you're gonna be seriously badass, but we're going for something different here.
Get down.
I guess I'm getting sidetracked. So the point I'm trying to make is that the easiest way for a movie to feel big is by doing things that haven't yet been standardized to feel small. The treasure hunt sequence here is so generic that I could pretty much sleep through it and it wouldn't make a difference. Whereas the finale here, even though it has its issues, does feel magically massive, and thus had me glued to the screen to find out what the hell's gonna happen. That's the difference between yet another expensive, big chungus Hollywood movie and a truly big, old-school Hollywood blockbuster.